Well, welcome everybody. It's nice to see folks in the chambers today. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and ask that the clerk take roll.
Agent.
Here.
Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez. Here. Thompson.
Here.
Woodings.
Here.
All present.
Before we get into business, I want to take a point of personal privilege and acknowledge that today is Councilmember Thompson's last city council meeting. And I've got something I want to present, which I'll do first, but then would love to say a couple of things. Because today I am proclaiming is TJ Thompson Day. And so TJ, I thought I'd read this. I just signed it before council so we could stick it in the frame so that you can have it. And especially so you can show it off with your daughter or your daughter. Whereas TJ Thompson has served the city of Boise as a city council member since 2010. And whereas TJ Thompson worked with the Idaho Association for the Education of Young Children and the Central District Health Department to address childhood obesity and strengthen childcare standards by developing the Healthy Initiative programs for children receiving care from licensed providers in Boise. And whereas Councilmember Thompson served as the city council liaison for the Boise Police Department, the Fire Department, the Community Planning Association for Southwest Idaho, Ada County Emergency Management, and the Office of Internal Audit. And whereas TJ partnered with the Idaho Humane Society and other animal care organizations to rewrite city code regarding animals for the city of Boise, specifically protecting animals from abuse, redefining animal cruelty, protecting exotic animals from being used for entertainment, encouraging dog licensing, and allowing residents to rescue animals from overheated vehicles. And whereas Councilmember Thompson championed improvements at Cottonwood Park, an 8-acre park in West Boise with a walking path, basketball courts, playground, and open play areas. And whereas Councilmember Thompson has served the residents of Boise with dignity, prudence, and wisdom. And the staff, residents, and city council members of the city of Boise truly appreciate his service and wish him and his family well in their future endeavors. Now, therefore, I, Lauren McLean, Mayor of Boise, do hereby proclaim December 14th, 2021 as TJ Thompson Day in the city of Boise. And so I want to present this to you to take home. And then I just want to say, apart from what was written, which really does acknowledge the accomplishments you've had, TJ, as a member of this body. And the accomplishments are really accomplishments because of the impact they have on our residents and the impact they've had on our community. And I first got to know you in 2008 when you had your first foray that I knew of into politics. And then was so excited to see you decide to run when you did, and really enjoyed joining you as the next youngest member of council when I did, because our experience was, so similar in so many ways. And you have stayed true to the city, true to your family, always committed to the things that you brought to the job. And I really appreciate that, and have appreciated the friendship, which of course won't end. But we'll really miss having you up here and seeing you on a weekly basis. And just want to thank you on behalf of the city, but from a personal perspective as well, for all that you've done.
Well, wow, this is really unexpected, and I'm glad I am wearing a mask so I could hide most everything except the tears. I really appreciate it, Madam Mayor. It's been a phenomenal ride, and I do still get to say some remarks on January 4th, so I'm going to save what I've prepared for that time, but this is really unexpected. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored, and each of those whereases really means so much to me. Those were definitely the pieces that so thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to call up Chief Lee. We've got several surprises in store for you. What is that show? The This Is Your Life show?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. you covered many of my talking points. So let me just, as a new citizen of the city of Boise here, express my sincere thanks to the years of service that you've given to this community. I know as I walk around and talk about the community and members of the department, your name comes up with a great deal of respect and fondness, both from the members of the community as well as the department. And as you make your transition from being Councilmember Thompson to Citizen Thompson, I wanted to be able to give you something other than a proclamation of your own day, which I think mine is now just a little bit smaller, but I did want to be able to give you something that you could put in your office to remember the appreciation that you have from the Boise Police Department for your years of service. So in recognition of your 12 years of dedicated service as a Boise City Council member, we commend you on your extensive efforts while serving as the public safety liaison. Through partnerships, collaboration, and understanding, Boise strives to be a city for everyone, a place where everyone can feel safe. Your contributions to that mission are greatly appreciated by the members of the Boise Police Department. And so on their behalf, I'd like to present to you this certificate of appreciation from the Boise Police Department. I'd make jokes about being suitable for framing, but apparently we already did that. So.
Next up, TJ, we got you a puppy.
Saving it in her office for a little while.
Thank you so much, Chief Lee. That means so much to me. The Boise Police Department means a great deal to me, just as Boise Fire has. And I've tried to be true to you guys, men and women of the Boise Police and Boise Fire. And I've been proud to serve you guys.
Madam Mayor, I too am going to hold most of my remarks for our January 5th meeting, but wanted to just say today, what a pleasure it has been to serve next to TJ for these last 12 years. And how nice it is to have a day that can just be you and not just, not the day when everybody's coming and going. And so when the mayor told me she was planning to do this proclamation, I thought it was such an important way to honor your service. And I think, as you noted, those whereases really do represent the fact that when you take on an issue, you take it on passionately and fully, and you see it through. And that's been to the betterment of the city of Boise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That means a great deal to me. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'll be real quick as well, because I've got some stuff that I'm planning on waiting to say. I did want to say that I think that one of the things that is most important is the legacy that you leave behind. And I remember when I was younger, seeing you up here when you first got elected, felt like it opened up a door for me, and I think for other young people to want to get involved. And I know that was something that got my wheels turning at a very, very young age. But not only that, I had the opportunity to interact with you a lot before I was elected, and the level of curiosity and time and attention that you gave to other people has left a really big impact on me. And I really think that that's one of the greatest gifts that you can give people is your time, your attention, and your curiosity. And I remember coming here and testifying on a variety of different things, and then you coming and finding me afterwards and asking additional questions or asking my thoughts. And it made it feel like what I had to say mattered. And so I just want to thank you for giving me that gift at a very, very young age. And I'm going to reserve the rest of my comments for January.
All right, well, more to come for sure, but this is a special day. I hope you enjoy the last couple of votes you'll be taking. And then we'll celebrate further in January. Thanks, everybody. With that, I'm going to move back to the agenda with a request for approval of the minutes from the work session and evening meeting of December 7th. Feels so mundane right now, but.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the city council meeting minutes of the work session and regular evening meeting of December 7th, 2021. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And next up, we have the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case it'll be removed from the general order of business, removed and considered in the general order.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented. Second.
We have a motion and a second. I want to just call attention to one, Resolution 58421. This is a resolution in a memorandum of agreement with Customs and Border Patrol. I just want to say thank you to the airport staff, to the delegation, to the governor, to my team for working together to resolve this issue and move an agreement forward so that those in private planes that are moving back and forth, particularly for business, are able to land here as they always have. And it seems minor, but the work that went into it was not. And so really appreciate that. And with that, clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, we have one ordinance on first reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on first reading be read by number and title only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 58-21. An ordinance CAR 21-00020, Boise Independent School District and Boise City Airport for property located 8373 West Victory Road, annexing 128 acres, and for property located at 6755 West Victory Road, annexing 4.25 acres of certain land and territory situated in Ada County, Idaho, adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Boise City, establishing and determining the land use classification of said 128 acres as A-1 open land and annexing 4.25 acres as M-1D light industrial with design review, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such annexation and zone change, directing the city engineer to lodge and file a legal description and the map for said annexed lands and territory, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Auditor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission, providing that a copy of said legal description and map of said annexed lands and territory be recorded with the Ada County Recorder and filed with the Ada County Assessor and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and provide an effective date.
Thank you. And next up, we have one on second reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 59-21, an ordinance amending Title 11, Chapter 3, Section 4, Subsection 20, Boise City Code to include new language addressing unpermitted work in the historic districts and provide an effective date.
And then third reading, a lot.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that further reading of ordinances 5121, 5221, 5321, 5421, 5521, 5621, and 5721 be dispensed with, and the record reflect that they have been read for the third time in full. Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 51-21. An ordinance CAR 21-00001 for property located at 121 South Spring Tree Lane, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance from R-2D medium density residential with design review overlay to R-3D multifamily residential with design review overlay, setting forth a recent statement in support of such zone change and provide an effective date. ORD 52-21. An ordinance CAR 21-00019 for property located at 9419 West Shoup Avenue, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from A-1 open lands to R-1B single family residential, setting forth a recent statement in support of such zone change and provide an effective date. ORD-53-21. An ordinance CAR 21-00015 for property located at 12481 West Ash Creek Street, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from T-1D technological industrial with design review to R-3D multifamily residential with design review, setting forth a recent statement in support of such zone change and provide an effective date. ORD-54-21, an ordinance CAR 21-00021 for property located at 4330 East Franklin Road, annexing 12.75 acres of certain lands and territory situated in Ada County, Idaho, adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Boise City, establishing and determining the land use classification of said 12.75 acres as M-1D light industrial with design review zone, setting forth a recent statement in support of such annexation and zone change, directing the city engineer to lodge and file a legal description and map for said annexed lands and territory, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Auditor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission, providing that a copy of said legal description and map of said annexed lands and territory be recorded with the Ada County Recorder and filed with the Ada County Assessor and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and provide an effective date. ORD-55-21, an ordinance CAR 21-00024 for property located at 9700 South Blue Cloud Lane, annexing 13.65 acres of certain lands and territories situated in Ada County, Idaho, adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Boise City, establishing and determining the land use classification of said 13.65 acres as M-2D, heavy industrial district with design review overlay, setting forth a recent statement in support of such annexation and zone change, directing the city engineer to lodge and file a legal description and map for said annexed lands and territory, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Auditor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission, providing that a copy of said legal description and map of said annexed lands and territory be recorded with the Ada County Recorder and filed with the Ada County Assessor and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and provide an effective date. ORD-56-21, an ordinance CAR 21-00014 for property located at 9435 West Overland Road, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classifications of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from R-1B single family residential to R-1CDA single family residential and development agreement, setting forth a recent statement in support of such zone change and provide an effective date. ORD-57-21, an ordinance declaring certain real property identified as Ada County Assessor's parcel number R8123003290 and located at 2108 South Atlantic Avenue in Boise City, Ada County, Idaho, as underutilized or not used by the city for public purposes, finding that the sale of the property is in the public interest, offering the sale of the property to an income-eligible buyer, authorizing city officials and staff to do all things necessary to conduct the real property sale transaction, and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. And now I have one ordinance on third reading.
Madam Mayor,
Oh, did I cut you off?
we need to adopt that.
Oh, excuse me.
Oh,
We need a
We're
motion
ready?
to adopt those. Yeah, I jumped ahead.
okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move that all rules of the council interfering with the immediate consideration of ordinance 6021 be suspended, that the portions of Idaho Code 5902 requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with.
Madam Mayor,
Records show,
Oh, yes,
I'm sorry, we need to adopt the ones that were
need-
on third reading.
we need to adopt the third. I
I'm
messed, I
sorry.
messed this up and then you followed my cue. We need to
we
pass.
need to adopt the others. Sorry. Well, we'll start over then. Sorry. Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinances 5121, 5221, 5321, 5421, 5521, 5621, and 5721.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings, Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Now, okay. Madam Mayor, I move that all rules of the council interfering with the immediate consideration of ordinance 6021 be suspended, that the portions of Idaho Code 5902 requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with, and the record show that it has been read for the 3rd time in full. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings, Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 60-21. An ordinance amending Boise City Code Title III, Chapter 6, entitled Child Care Facilities, amending the scope of the ordinance, adding new definitions and amending other definitions, updating child care worker licensing standards and requirements to permit temporary licensing status, providing standards and requirements for temporary licensing status, updating and clarifying background and criminal history check requirements, striking Title III, Chapter 6, Section 11, subsection E for redundancy, amending child worker ratios to include workers employed under a temporary license status, requiring child care facilities to maintain records for child care workers employed under temporary license status and to post such license under a temporary license to the public, requiring all child care workers employed under a temporary license status to be under the direct supervision of a fully licensed child care worker at all times, providing for a waiver of the reading rules, approve a summary of the ordinance, and provide an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd move approval of ordinance 60-21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I just want to commend Jamie on this ordinance. When it was one of my very first tasks as a brand new member of City Council, to help our childcare industry get workers more quickly. We were having a big backlog of background checks. And so I tried to help Jamie as much as possible get those through a little bit more quickly. But this ordinance really takes it to the next level. And I think will help our childcare workers get employment more quickly and help our providers get employees more quickly. And we all know that this is so desperately needed by our working parents right now. So thank you so much for all your work.
Madam Mayor. Yeah, I also want to thank you, Jamie. I want to thank your office, your department, all the work that's gone into it from your department as well, Madam Mayor. And because this is so important. I mean, excuse me, I spent, my second term, I think, almost entirely on childcare. And it's something that means a great deal to me. And this was one of the issues that continuously came up was that lag of employment. And it's such a challenge for city, for childcare facilities. And this is a huge step forward and takes it to the next level. And it's going to continue to make Boise's childcare second to none in the state of Idaho. So it's a great ordinance. Thank you.
I won't be voting, but I did want to just say a couple things. First off, I really appreciate the work of Jamie and the clerk's office, our team in community relationships, as well as so many others that put time into this. We've heard from so many parents saying that they are struggling to find affordable childcare, and that's forcing them to make decisions about work that their families really don't want to have to make because they can't afford that either. And we've heard from so many providers that are experiencing labor shortages and in this tight labor market, which makes it hard then to have enough affordable, accessible childcare. And that impacts not only families in this community, but our economy. And in fact, it was our economic recovery task force back in what we thought was the end of COVID, but really in the early days of COVID, that recommended that we convene a task force of childcare experts and business leaders to address this issue because they saw it as an economic recovery and an economic issue. And so we convened a childcare task force. And that task force asked us to address licensing, accessibility, and affordability. And I want to say that this ordinance, I would say, does each of those things, while I would also say we need much more ahead, and we're working on that with the federal administration with community partners, et cetera, to meet childcare demands in this community. But the ordinance addresses licensing by allowing childcare employees to start working immediately while background checks are being done. And we keep children safe by having them under supervision, but that process can take 3 to 8 weeks. And so rather than waiting to have someone that can watch kiddos while parents head back to work, they can get to work. It makes childcare more accessible by getting more childcare workers into the workforce, like we just mentioned, so it's more available. And that also, of course, gets more parents into the workforce more quickly because they're relying on it and their budgets need it. And then it addresses affordability, something that TJ brought up that we've heard loud and clear by waiving licensing fees and covering the costs of background checks. And some of that was addressed in some of the budget changes earlier today. And so we know that there's much more to do. We're looking forward to doing it. There's opportunity with the administration, with Build Back Better, with nonprofit organizations and even businesses to create more accessible, affordable, high quality childcare in Boise. So TJ, we will not drop the mantle of taking care of kids as you've impressed upon us. And that's why it's one of those whereases so clearly. And Holly, appreciate the work that you did to update the ordinance before and really look forward to seeing, the impact that this ordinance change has on the needs of the community and then seeing what more we can do together.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Jamie, for all your work on this, and thank you to my colleagues for making this a priority as well. I have seen some comments on social media questioning whether or not we should be expediting putting people in place as childcare workers before their background checks are done. But I don't think that parents who are pressed to return to the workforce, to the workplace, when they need to have somebody watch their children, I don't think that we are putting our aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents through background checks. We are taking advantage of the resources that are available. And unfortunately, in that desperation, at times our children end up in situations that are less than ideal and quite honestly dangerous. I know that firsthand. I know we've heard talk recently about who is a danger to our children, and the statistics show it's people we know. It's the kind, loving members of our family and our friend group. And I would say that having these structures in place that make it possible for our children to be in as safe of an environment as they can possibly be is the best step forward, because I can attest the wounds of childhood are addressed for the rest of an adult's life. And so not only do we need our adults returning to the workforce and having their children be cared for while they can focus on work, we need to be mindful of the work and the effort that we put into taking care of our kids now. It's going to be long lasting as to the type of individual that we have in our community moving forward and the types of resources that we need to put into that. So I'd say the work of our child care providers is heroic. And so I thank anybody who is willing to take that on. We certainly don't pay our folks enough, and we put them through the rigors of background checks. So I just want the public to keep that in mind when they think that we're cutting corners. We are not. We're just trying to make it possible for our children to be in a safe space while their parents return to work.
Thanks, everybody. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to special business. First, we have the appointment of Molly Otter to the Historic Preservation Commission for a 3-year term. And I think that might be Molly behind the mask. That's right. So Molly's here, but first I'll head this, excuse me, I'll just pass it to you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I ask unanimous consent to appoint Molly Otter to the Historic Preservation Commission for a 3-year term ending December 2021, and welcome Molly aboard.
Just to clarify the record, December 2024, but it's written that
Didn't I
way,
say
so we're
that?
good. Yeah. Without objection?
Ending December 2024.
Without objection. Well, I want to give Molly a chance to say hello if you'd like it. I really appreciate your willingness to serve on this committee. You have hands-on experience with renovating and restoring a historic home in our city. And I believe that you'll bring a lot to offer from that experience and your commitment to preservation. You can come on up to this mic here if you'd like.
Do I need to turn it on?
It's
Or is
on.
it- Oh, well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to serving on the Historical Preservation Commission. As the mayor mentioned, I actually have renovated a big historic home in the city already and have grown up in many historic homes. So I think I bring a lot of experience from a homeowner's perspective to the commission. Additionally, my background is all in finance, so I'm hoping some of that financial acumen will help the commission as it thinks about cost of the challenges that face it. And I'm looking forward to working with the other commissioners and the staff. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Chloe and Ross and Courtney Washburn, and it looks like Mary Grant, all to talk about our lease program and with the Boise Art Museum in particular.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we're bringing the presentation regarding the nonprofit lease and ground lease policies that you set for us a while back. We were hopeful that we could wrap up all of that work by the end of the year, but we have been unable to secure a current lease with the Boise Art Museum. So Chloe and Mary are here just to give you an update on where we are in terms of your overall policy direction. And then I'll return to get your guidance and direction on next steps associated with the remaining lease in regards to the policy you set. Thank you. And we have some slides that I'm hoping will pop up momentarily. Perfect, thank you. Great, so like Courtney said, I am here to basically provide a brief reminder.
Chloe?
Yes.
I have particular trouble hearing your voice for whatever reason. I know we're getting the new, but if you could speak up, it would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this better? I am here today to provide a brief reminder to the council on the nonprofit facility lease policy you passed earlier this year. And that should set some context for the lease the city has proposed to BAM in the negotiations we have been engaging in since June. As you may recall, in spring of this year, council directed staff to develop a policy that would govern all of the leases the city has with nonprofits who live in our facilities. At the time, we had around 13 different leases with varying lengths, rent amounts, maintenance obligations. And while I think we all agree that these are beneficial leases and relationships for both the city and the nonprofits, they impact city resources in terms of time and dollars. And there are also some equity issues related to the degree to which we support each nonprofit across the board and how we're selecting those to live in our facilities. So with that in mind, we set out to create a policy that would bring the leases into alignment, recoup some of the cost to upkeep our aging facilities, and address the equitable treatment of the nonprofits by the city. Staff began with best practice research and found that cities are interacting or housing nonprofits in various ways across the country and also Australia. Some cities are charging by square foot, some do an RFP process, others charge a percentage of gross profit, some do the equivalent of the dollar per year rent. And overall, what we found is this is something that everyone is dealing with a little bit differently. And thus we worked to put together a policy that worked for the city of Boise, as well as our local nonprofits. What we did identify as part of that best practice research were 4 main components that would benefit from alignment. And that is a standard method for establishing rent, delineation of the landlord and tenant maintenance and utility obligations, the definition of what a regular lease length is, and then a way to address if the nonprofit is benefiting the community through different subsidies or access. Based on these elements, council then directed staff to conduct an outreach campaign to sort of socialize the policy, get information back that could adjust the policy and generally inform. Based on that directive, we contacted each of the impacted nonprofits and conducted in-person meetings with a few minor exceptions. Overall, the feedback was very positive, and in many instances, nonprofits had been expecting an adjustment and welcomed an open door to have a conversation about an update to the agreement and the components of that. Based on these conversations, we also came across a couple of things to inform and update the policy as it had previously existed. We came across 3 organizations who own the facility that live on city land. And thus we wrote a ground lease policy to sort of complement the facility lease policy. And then in the course of the conversations, we also talked with organizations who are planning to conduct significant work on our city-owned facilities. And they wanted a longer-term lease to ensure their fundraising efforts were sustainable and fruitful. And so based on that, we extended the lease length to a maximum of 10 years and identified some options to provide a right of first refusal. Throughout all of these conversations, we emphasized the city's commitment to finding a sustainable solution for each nonprofit, knowing that everyone's coming to the table with a different combination of resources and commitments. We ultimately came back to council in August, combining the results of those conversations with the best practice research with a policy that council approved at that time. The policy elements are listed in the bullets. It outlines a rental rate of 25% of the fair market value or $2,000 a month, whichever amount is lower. It standardizes the lease length to no less than 1 year and no more than 10 years. And this is to provide both entities an opportunity to come together and kind of relook at the agreement and make adjustments based on how things have been going. It designates utilities and minor maintenance as the responsibility of the nonprofit, and the larger maintenance work as the responsibility of the city. That's a pretty traditional landlord-tenant relationship. The policy states that nonprofits must provide a subsidized or residential fee to ensure access, and then again differentiates those ground leases from facility rentals. So that sort of should hopefully refresh your memory a little bit on where we've been with the development of the nonprofit policy. Now I'm going to transition into the art museum facility, the proposed facility lease. As part of the outreach conversation, staff met with the BAM executive director and their legal counsel in June of this year. At this time, we shared a lease with them that was in alignment with the policy that would be approved in August. And the intent was to open up a conversation for negotiations to begin. BAM represents the final agreement to be brought into alignment with the city's policy. And it is worth noting the city has been working to sign a new lease with BAM since 2017. In June, when we met with leadership, BAM expressed frustration with changes in staff negotiating a new lease at the city. However, despite the continuity of staff throughout the summer, fall, and winter of this year, city staff has been unable to make meaningful progress towards a lease. Again, staff shared the lease containing the elements that were in alignment with the policy that council approved, and staff requested substantive feedback from BAM. Staff also requested a presentation to the board about the nonprofit lease policy a la the same conversations we had been having or presentations we had been doing with the other boards throughout the summer or throughout the spring. In August, staff presented to the board, and in September, the executive director and chief of staff met one-on-one. At that point, we had not received substantive feedback about this proposal, but the outcome of the one-on-one meeting resulted in a proposal from the city to extend the timeline for BAM to take over certain costs that would include rent payments and the maintenance.
And so just to be clear on that, Chloe, you mean this list? Oh, great. That's what I was going to ask. So this is the list that you showed us first was the original proposal based on the policy that the council
Yes, Madam
passed.
Mayor.
And then this is what changed after the meeting between the two.
Yes,
Okay.
and you will note that it's really just an extension of time to begin payments. So we made the counteroffer after the meeting in September and then extended it again through November. And we again requested feedback from BAM, which ultimately yielded in the following feedback. The first was an assertion that a building appraisal is needed to enter into a lease. The second is a request for a 25-year lease agreement with an option to renew. And the third was a rejection of the fact that the city covers substantive maintenance costs, including the partial funding of an FTE. In that response, the executive director also declined to present at this council meeting. And staff does not consider this to be substantive feedback or efforts to move forward in good faith negotiations. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney.
Madam Mayor, council members, I think our best day as a city and the goals are to both respect the role the nonprofit plays in the community, obtain a lease that meets the policies you set so that we can begin long-term planning for what's best for the city and for the Boise Art Museum moving forward. Again, this is the remaining issue we have from the implementation based on your direction. So we're looking to you for guidance and instruction on how you would like us to proceed.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, here's my guidance and direction. We need a lease. We have a lease policy. The MOU that we have now doesn't work. It creates liability for both parties. We've been having these conversations for 5 years now without real progress. We need to move that along. We need to generate some progress. And so my direction would be suspend financial support until we can negotiate a lease and get this issue resolved.
Madam Mayor. I guess maybe to start off, just a couple of questions. In the memo, and then the letter written by BAM, I thought that I saw a request to meet and to have a conversation and to have this outlined in a work session. And what I'm having a hard time completely understanding is if they want that request, if they want that conversation, but then decline, was it that this meeting was too soon and that they needed more time to prepare for that conversation? I'm trying to figure out what the disconnect between them not coming today, but then also requesting that work session at the same time.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I can't clarify that for you. We put the date of this meeting on their radar, I think about a month ago after I met with the executive director. And so it's unclear to me what different outcome in a work session at a future date versus this meeting was going to accomplish.
Madam Mayor, I guess my follow-up there is I feel like there's something else that's on the table because it also seemed like that there was a conversation or a request that they had made a counter offer that I think amounted to the city paying them potentially $15 million. And there's more details that go to it. But what I'm trying to get at is that I'm still open to having a conversation if they're willing to have the conversation. And so if we can have a work session where we can get all of the details on the table to make that decision, that would be great. But it puts us in a really, really weird spot when we've offered that and now it's been declined. And so if there is opportunity to have that discussion, I would certainly be in favor with moving forward to having that work session that we offered, that they declined, but then re-asked for. But if they're not willing to have that conversation, I don't know what the path forward is.
Madam Mayor.
I'm gonna let Councilmember Bajan go and then the president.
Well, they're not here and they didn't come last time. Strong indication of willingness to have the conversation. Two, my read of the record is that staff is asking us for our help to give them something firm that will motivate this conversation to happen and to come to a resolution. My other read of the record is a 5-year stumbling around this issue, probably as a result of a lot of delay and a lot of just the parties not being close. And so my initial comments were designed to give the staff a real motivating tool, suspending payments, and clear guidance as to what we need, which at the end of the day is a lease. I believe that if we give the staff those two things, the conversation will happen very quickly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Bajan that we need to get something on the table for the benefit of BAM as much as for us, that we are in a position where there's no agreement in place, puts both of us in tremendous danger from a liability standpoint. And I think it's irresponsible not to get something down. My biggest question after reading the response from BAM, I just want to make sure, do we hold clear title to the building? If they raised all the money for it, the city owns clear title to it?
Mary, I'll answer.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, Council President, we have done that background research. We've looked into the Ada County Assessor title and everything like that. And yes, currently there is no separation in parcels.
Mary,
There-
could you speak up just a bit, please?
Yes, certainly. Sorry about that. Yes, we've done that background. Council President looked into the Ada County Assessor's website and confirmed that there's no separate parcel or anything for that particular facility. I would also note for council members that in each of our prior agreements, it does make very clear that city ownership is also extends to the facility, particularly in the current operation and maintenance agreement that we have. It reaffirms that the facility is owned by the city and any improvements or constructions to that facility, title after construction should be delivered to the city.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we got that on the record. Madam Mayor, the other question I have is, I guess it's not really a question, I guess a comment. If we were to go forward with the staff's proposal, first of all, I would be reluctant to give anyone 10 years to come up with a resident benefit. I think they can come up with a resident benefit tomorrow based on income and admission. And I suspect that the folks that aren't coming today who couldn't afford it would be the only ones who'd use it. And so it wouldn't cost them anything. But whatever it is, I'm not willing to wait 10 years for that benefit. However, I think the rest of it, to me, offers a real opportunity to then have this broader discussion about the long-term future of what the agreement's going to be. Put a 10-year agreement in place that includes 2 years for them to fundraise for the salary of the position that we've been covering. Immediately, they begin paying utilities. And then starting in 2026, they begin paying prorated rent toward the full rent by 2031. If we haven't come up with some other agreement by then based on them buying out the building or some other thing that they've been talking about. But I think that's quite a fair opportunity for them to have a 10-year period to figure out what the next step is. Having said that, I'll say that, BAM is an enormously valuable institution to this city. I think all of us believe that. I certainly do. I think it's always been something that's added benefit to the city as well as to the arts culture in the city. And whatever we do, my purpose would be putting both of us on very solid footing going forward so that both the city of Boise and its taxpayers are adequately protected in the ownership of this building, and BAM and its members are adequately protected in their residency in the building. But most importantly, that we put BAM in a position to move forward to become an even stronger institution and continue to serve the city long-term.
Madam Mayor, first of all, I want to commend everyone on going to all of the nonprofits and going to all of their boards and doing all that work. I know it was probably a tremendous amount of work. And like you said, I think several of the nonprofits had been expecting it for a while. So it didn't come as any surprise, as boards. As a prior board chair on one of the nonprofits, we had known for several years, we're like, this sweetheart deal is not going to last forever. We got to get ready. And I know that they were very happy to be able to maintain their facility on that ground lease. This is just a really unfortunate situation. It sucks when an incredible organization like BAM that is beloved by so many in our city, it feels like there's just, I don't know if there's some kind of impasse or if it's a failure to communicate or what's going on. But I think that, like everyone said, it's got to end. We need to have an agreement with them that protects both of us from liability, that respects their position in the community, and that really shows that we value their presence here, but that also respects all of our taxpayers, all of the other nonprofits who I'm sure would also love to live on a city facility if they could, and without showing preference. So I definitely agree with Councilmember Bajent. We need to make it so that people's hands are forced in this issue. And I hate that it's come to that. But I just think that that's where we are. My other concern is on the side of capital improvements to the facility. I'm wondering, because the city of Boise has ownership of the facility, Boise Art Museum likely will want to make significant capital improvements to the facility at some point in the future. I'm wondering if there's some consideration there that can happen that might be different than some of our other leaseholds, so that they have, I'm not sure if it's a longer term lease or if it's some kind of, buyback provision from the city for those improvements, but something that really respects that relationship of ownership and fundraising and capital improvements going forward. So thank you. I really appreciate all your work.
Well, I'll just check in with staff. The reason that we needed to do this was because the Art Museum would like to have a discussion about the long term, like much beyond the scope of this lease, relationship with the city and the building. And we want to do that because they're an important member of this community, important organization. But the policy that you all passed in August, set our staff out on the road to ensure that we had leases that were updated with every organization. So wanted to bring this forward so that staff could get the guidance they need as they continue these negotiations. So Courtney, Chloe, do you have any questions, further follow-up clarity you would like, or have you gotten enough to move forward?
Madam Mayor, if I could just read back what I believe the next step is and just get approval or disapproval, I would appreciate it. So I would like to move forward in sending a correspondence to the board and executive director of the Boise Art Museum, suspending financial support pending a successful work session. And by successful, I mean a mutually agreed upon process out of that to bring this to conclusion. If that satisfies everybody, that was my best shot.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Courtney, did you mean a work session here at council or a work session among the city's negotiating team and BAM?
I'm here with the council. That is what they requested in their correspondence. They did request a smaller group of council. So I'll leave that up to you all, but I do believe our best day is to have the council have a conversation with the leadership at the Art Museum and agree to some parameters and then a schedule for resolution and the process. I think some of the confusion is who's negotiating with who, what's the deadline for conclusion. In some cases, we've had Mary, in some cases, it's been Chloe on the policy, and they're probably experiencing that on the same time. So if they were to join a work session, at least from the city side, I envision us putting together a process in which we can engage with them in order to bring this to resolution.
Fair, thank you. I guess the only expectation that I would set is, I trust and admire our staff, and I know they've done a very good job. And so that work session will be, from my perspective, an opportunity to hear and be heard and exchange and communicate, but not an end run around the hard work that our staff has done, and not an opportunity to get a deal that nobody else would get, none of the other cooperating nonprofits have gotten.
Madam Mayor.
Well, and I'll just jump in there too, council member. We believe that a work session is a work session. And because the council as a body passed a policy with regard to leases, it's not in our purview to negotiate privately a departure from that policy. And so, doing this as a body transparently, it's making a decision on whether or not you want to make an allowance, as Councilmember Whitting said, you might consider X, Y, or Z from the policy, is properly before you, but it ought to occur in a session like this.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Mary. I got to be honest.
Lisa, I'm gonna ask you to-
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I got to be honest. It wasn't until I joined the city that I realized that the city had anything to do with the Boise Art Museum. I thought it was its own entity. And my involvement with the Art Museum in years previous had to do with a really robust programming that reached out to diverse communities, low-income communities. I met people who are now community leaders who were there as young folks. So I haven't really experienced that as of late. And I think if that were the case, it would be very similar to the programs that we see the city supporting through our Parks and Rec. And so there really hasn't been that. I think having that transparent work session, not only where we could come to terms finally after all this time, but also an opportunity for the community to recognize what this relationship has been. I think there are a lot of people in the community like myself who are under the impression that the city has nothing to do with that building. And I think it would be an opportunity for us to be transparent about what BAM is and the relationship between the city and the Art Museum. So I welcome that work session as well.
Madam Mayor, I believe I have direction. I will come back to you if I am unable to schedule a follow-up work session with some proposed next steps.
Thank you. Good. All right. Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the precinct level Canvas 2021 election results. Jamie, welcome. And again, thanks. You were sitting down when Councilmember Whittings and others, thank you for your work on childcare and some other things. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And in addition, there's a lot of other folks in addition to myself that have worked on that policy. So kudos to all of those individuals as well. So thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. I am here today to present the certified Boise City Municipal Election, Boise City Sewer District Bond results from the Ada County Clerk's Office as required by Idaho Code 50-412. Previously, I was here for the same purpose for the individual candidate results. So this may sound like a repeat, but it is a little bit different. The Ada County Commissioners, acting as the board of canvassers of election, canvassed the results of the election that took place on November 2nd, 2021. The general election results were certified by Ada County and forwarded to the Boise City Clerk's Office on November 16th, 2021. Additionally, Ada County has provided the city with a more precise record of the election results by precinct, which needs to be added into our record. Per Idaho code and consistent with the individual council election results, the Boise City Council needs to accept these results and have them entered in the minutes of the city council proceedings today.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I move that we accept the precinct level canvas 2021 election results for the city of Boise.
Second.
We have a motion, and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg. Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Pagent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. All right, next we've got the end of year report with Mike Chirac. Welcome.
Madam Mayor, council members, good afternoon. Yes, I have the end of year report to present to you. There was an electronic version of the report in the council packet. And as usual, I have some slides to walk through the highlights for you. The cover has our new pink tree on it. And I will go through the general fund and then talk a little bit about the enterprise and the other funds. Again, try to keep it high level. And then also there's an economic brief that goes in this report as well. If you look at our income statement, the one thing you will see is there is an apparent $11.5 million loss, but this is just due to some balance sheet adjustments. There was a positive result for the year. If we look at our revenue categories, our revenues actually did well. This budget was set as a pandemic shutdown was occurring, a lot of uncertainty. So we had generally conservative budgets and our revenues held up well in most areas. So our revenue categories, when we look at them individually, they were 14 million or 6.4% over the budget. This really comes from the local economy doing well overall. Certainly a lot has changed, but we kind of see a resumption of the strong economy we had before the pandemic that's really come back. We're still seeing high in-migration, lots of activity. We're learning to do business with the pandemic. There was federal stimulus. There's still high demand. Demand is so high that we're seeing shortages, still, and there's some inflation occurring. So out of all of that, that's what we look at. We still see things doing well overall, but again, we're still dealing with uncertainty. We're still living with the pandemic. On the expense side, we had significant expense savings, over 25 million, nearly 10% of the budget. I will get into this a little bit, but it's really driven by high-level vacancies, staff vacancies, the great resignation you hear about, it's affecting all organizations, us included. There's related M&O savings with vacancies, canceled events, facilities which weren't open sometimes during the year. Plus, we have supply shortages, vendor delays, so they're just some things we could not purchase. So that has created a lot of one-time expense savings in addition to the revenues. The majority of this we saw coming, and we did program it for use in the FY22 budget. I will show you that on the next slide. The other thing to mention is just a lot of the things we couldn't get are ended up being rebudgeted just because we ordered something, it's not here yet, but we have a higher level of rebudgets this year also. Now, unfortunately, I need to show you some numbers. We call this one the eye chart. In particular, if I just draw your attention to the two blue shaded areas, one is on revenue variances for the year, and the one below it is on expenses. And the next two slides, I will look to give you some insights onto the main things going on there. The other thing is at the bottom, you can see our end of year adjustments and how we get to the end of year numbers. This does get rather technical. We work with our accounting staff to get through all this. But the first number that's shaded gray, 11.5 million negative, is the apparent accounting loss you'll see. We exclude some paper gains, or we add back losses actually on fixed income investments. We don't count those because we don't plan to realize those, even though they're recognized on the accounting statements. And then we have things like the public safety grant that was in last year, actually, which comes through in some of the adjustments below, and we adjust for rebudgets and things. And then the last three lines are really what we work with at year end. The 4.6 million, the third line from the bottom in the budget workshop / strategic initiatives, those were the interview recommendations you approved this morning, along with the final line, the 2.3 million we recommended for the capital fund. So that's where those two are in our financial statements. And then the other line near the bottom, the 17.4 million, is planned for use in this year. We're going to pay off approximately $14 million of debt the city has had for a while, and also make a larger transfer to the capital fund. So looking a little closer at the revenues, sales tax, $3.7 million over budget. We had a very conservative budget. We thought sales tax would decline during the pandemic. Instead, it went up, partly due to stimulus, partly due to things we're still not sure about. But so we had a low budget there we fixed in fiscal year 22. Development fees were also significantly over budget. The local construction economy is back at or near capacity, and so revenues were high there. Again, we didn't have a very high budget. Property tax was 1.6 million higher. It's due to things like past due property tax collection from prior years, partial year occupancy taxes on new homes. You know, a new home that's a few months, someone lives there, they pay tax. We don't plan for that. And then there was an administrative fee with the public safety grant that the state had. We didn't have that in our budget. Liquor tax continues to be high, just due to the high sales at retail liquor stores. That is paid a year in arrears, but that again has been high. And then other revenue, here is where we have federal pandemic grant revenue, different federal acts. There's a lot of money out there that flows through other revenue. And here's where you have some paper losses, some book losses on fixed income investments, which do have to hit our financials. Department revenue is last because that is the one that is a little bit different. We do have some revenue losses there. They're fairly limited, but I'll just give you a sense of that. The first one there is we were 1.5 million over the budget, but we had reduced it, foreseeing difficulty meeting budget. Parks user fees were somewhat rearranged this year. Zoo gate revenues were up over 400,000, an outdoor activity people can do. Golf courses, the revenues there up 800 and 900,000, like 40% over budget, over last year, over the year before. So again, something people can do. Idaho Ice World being closed, the pools being closed, revenues were down there. And then a key category is just registration fees for park programs and camps and all that. That is about half of what it was a couple of years ago. So that is where we're still not able to offer a full slate of programs and get people in it and actually have the programs occur as they were. So hopefully that will come back. The other thing in department revenues, we have parking fees, licensing and fines. Parking is still down about, if you look at the whole year, I haven't looked recently to see if we are making further headway, but about 25-30% down from pre-pandemic. There's just less parking downtown still. But we were close to a reduced budget. And then animal, event, business licensing, we're 80 to 90% of where we were. There's some shortfall there, but all in all, the losses are pretty limited to certain areas, and we're more than offset by other revenues. Moving to expenses, we were 4.2% under budget. 2/3 of our costs in general fund are people costs, and so it's $7.1 million. This graph is on page 13 of the report, and fiscal year 21 starts just left of center, and you can see the FTE vacancies go up. And that is just driving a lot of the expense savings. It's affecting our ability to execute in some places just because we don't have people to execute certain projects and do things. There's also the second line is the police line. We have a lot of police vacancies. So that is there as well, and that contributes. Other general fund expenses, maintenance and operations expenses, we were 12.1 million, over 20% below budget. This is a number of accounts over many departments, but professional services, 5 million, contract and miscellaneous costs, 3 million. Our operating contingencies were mostly unused. That was 2.6 million. We underspent on minor equipment, travel, training, and utilities. So significant cost savings there. When we look at it, a lot of that, again, gets rebudgeted to the extent it's related to projects or other things, or even things on order. The next category there is miscellaneous expenses, about 7 million. That is mainly grant costs, and a lot of that is VRT grant costs, which we are rebudgeting for State Street transit development. The last category there is major equipment. We spend about 2/3 of the budget, vehicle and other equipment delivery delays. We're explaining a lot of that, or just delays in getting things ordered, but that is what explains that variance. And then here I mentioned the expense rebudgets, which was actually on the consent agenda, and you received those. I believe there's a lot there. Expense rebudgets of 16 million. Moving on to the enterprise funds, airport has rebounded quicker than expected a year ago. Revenues were 7 million, almost 30% above budget, about 5 million above last year. So things are going well there with passenger traffic returning. Capital revenues were also high, about twice the budget. Looking at operating expenditures, they were 5 million under budget, a slight increase from last year. They had savings in personnel and in maintenance and operations costs. They are getting staff back up, but the vacancies and cost savings are benefiting them too, but some of the same things going on. Also at airport, capital projects, large budget, did not spend much of it. 17 million out of over 100, nearly 120 million, but multiple large projects are now in process. Geothermal water sales revenue was about 30% over budget, slightly above last year. The budget was set conservatively in these public works funds just because there was uncertainty. Will we have issues with people not being downtown, and here buildings not taking water, that type of thing. Total revenue was down from last year, but it was due to miscellaneous income and other factors. Operating costs were below budget and last year just due to lower repair and maintenance costs. The other big public works funds, solid waste revenue there was above budget, about 2% due to commercial revenues. Again, this budget was set conservatively, expecting there could have been continued revenue losses or just shortfalls in revenue. And operating expenditures were slightly below budget. Water renewal, their revenue was 8%, about 5 million over a conservative budget again, mainly due to commercial revenues coming back and higher crop revenues for the farm. And then last year, this was about a 10.5% increase, including some rate increases. High capital revenue in water renewal also due to connection fees and development contributions. Total operating expenditures were about 7% under budget. Due to personnel, there was a large pension liability adjustment, which reduced expense this year. A lot of the enterprise funds had higher pension liability costs last year with the value of investments and things. And then also there were just some M&O expense savings in water renewal. And then like airport, capital and major equipment expenditures were less than half of the budget, but we know there's a lot coming and projects are ramping up. Other funds, housing funds, housing has a lot of different things going in it when we look at the funds together. The one item that stands out this year is just revenue being up significantly due to the federal emergency rental funding flowing through one of the housing funds. Operating expenditures were about 2/3 of budget, and those are always dependent on timing of projects and the work that goes with them. In property management, rental revenue was slightly over budget, 3%. Operating expenditures were about 18% under budget, just lower maintenance costs experienced there. And then fleet services revenue is down there, just reduced demand for vehicle services. Operating expenditures were likewise down. Two more funds. Risk three, if you count risk management, workers' compensation together. That is the first one. Revenue there was slightly above budget and due to internal insurance revenues, and revenues were up over last year. You likely recall workers' compensation, we're getting a much higher level of claims. Costs were going up in the insurance industry that are affecting us as well. So expenditures were under budget, but the thing going on there is we're seeing higher costs for insurance, and we do expect to see higher costs for insurance going forward, higher self-insurance limits. But for the time being, we've kind of gotten to a good spot with where those funds are financially. And then the capital fund. Capital revenues were just slightly under budget. A lot of this has to do with timing of impact fee transfers and when projects occur. We've got rebudgets of some revenues into 22. And then capital expenditures were, expenses were significantly under budget. Again, a lot of those are getting recommended for rebudget, just project delays get increased with the pandemic and everything else. And that's the last point. Project delays due to supply issues or shortages of labor, whether it's our labor or contract labor, external consultants, that's all contributing to a higher level of underspend and rebudgets. And the longer these projects take, unfortunately, you see some cost escalation as well. I will pause there in case there are any questions on the general fund or enterprise or other funds before I get in the economic report.
Thank you. Just a couple of higher level questions, and then just a clarifying one. So franchise fees are up for the first time in a very long time. And it looks to me like it's associated with growth. Cable fees continue to fall, but water and solid waste, the places where growth would have an impact, are growing. Are we going, I just want to make sure that that was noticed. I'm sure it was, and we're going to be accounting for it as we budget next year.
And Mayor, council member, yes, there was a rebound, so to speak, in franchise fee revenue. What happened with the pandemic and some of those revenues were softer. It presented a budgeting challenge, and we probably were a little conservative there. And as things did bounce back a little bit, the shakeout of things coming back, we were a little bit higher. So yeah, we will reevaluate that this year as we look at the 23 budget. The other thing in water, I haven't confirmed this, but we know it was a hot summer with a lot of water usage that likely factored in. So those tend to be quite stable, and that's frankly why I didn't really even talk to them. But yeah, we'll be looking at those, and they still are there as an important revenue source.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then on the sales tax, I'm still unclear what it's going to take for us to get beyond the 1% limit that we've been put under. So I don't know if you can help me understand that a little more better.
Madam Mayor, council member, yes, I actually have the slide here, the economic indicators. I have that, and I did not get into that there, but I have a
okay, we
slide
can
here.
do that later. And then the final question, if
I don't want to gloss over that though, Council President. That's a really good point. So that should come, we should definitely be sure to cover that, because we look at the state receipts up 18%, but because of the legislation, we're capped at 1% growth. And that's a revenue stream that is very much influenced by point of sale, of course, and it's an alternative revenue stream to property tax that we're so reliant on. So these caps just like further hamstring cities. So if we have graphs to show that, that'd be really helpful for us to understand, but also for the public to understand.
Yeah.
When you get to it.
Thank you. Yes, that's one of the few growing revenue sources we have, and in our case, it's capped. Then the last thing, just a clarifying question. Net available resources, it looks like we rebudgeted all of those, or we're in our IBC that we approved earlier in the day. We put all of those into capital fund for overruns on costs for current capital projects. So first of all, is that correct? So we've essentially, we've taken the end of year and we've either rebudgeted or assigned it somewhere.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, yes. In the strategic initiatives line, the 4.6 million, some of those were called out for specific capital related projects. Like I believe the fountain and ADA repairs, or
It was Gary Lane. So green up, speed up the green up of Gary Lane this next fiscal year. So Northwest residents have access to green space. The fountain, as you referenced, some ADA updates might have been separate, and then the rest was to the general capital.
To the general capital fund. Yeah, okay. And it just looks like, so my comment here is it looks like there will be more of these kinds of savings even before we complete next year's budget. And we should be really thinking hard about, there will be continue to be cost overruns, I suspect, but there might also be another project or two like the Gary Lane one, especially a micro park here or there that we might be able to pick up with some of these revenues. I just want us to be thoughtful about that and be looking out for it as this next 6 months or so goes by.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, yes, so noted, yes. As we get into the year with still vacancies, we're likely to have more cost savings there, and that is a common way we look to something we do with those funds is put them into the capital fund, especially with rising costs.
Yeah.
And page 4 of the report does list the 4.6 million strategic initiatives, and then the way that accounting works, there was a 2.3 million at the end, the net available resources. That is listed as just going into the capital fund to help bolster that fund with cost overruns or new projects that make. And then the other thing is the graph for sales tax, which I will get to. That is on page 73. And yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. I'll move on with the economic indicators then. So the end of the report, pages 66 to 76 has an economic brief we do every quarter. Pages 6 to 7 also has some economic information. And highlights here are employment. Our September unemployment was down to 2%. It was 3% in June. It was 5.8% a year ago. This is getting very low already. No surprise if you're, drive around town and see for sale or jobs, hiring everywhere. It probably can't go a whole lot lower, but it is down that low. The interesting thing is if we look at just Boise City, we can isolate that. The labor force actually shrunk slightly in the last year. So lower labor force participation. You've maybe heard about this or seen this, and it's like working parents, some of them are still home, or people are taking their time to go back to the workforce or something. And some of that should occur, but with just a lot of retirements, just that labor market has really gotten tight. And so that is a closely watched thing now. In a year or two, hopefully we get labor participation up, because without that, it's not certain where the additional people will come from to do jobs. The other interesting thing is our total employment tracks closely to 2019. We just haven't grown above that. So we're just constrained a bit, but it is kind of a labor shortage. Construction development, the annual permit volume was up almost 7%, 1,500 permits when we look at that compared to last year. And total development fee revenue was up 2 million to a record 14.4 million. And PDS has all the work they can handle. It just keeps coming and there's a lot of activity out there, which is good, but a lot of growth coming fast. Okay, so here is sales tax. We were limited to 1% growth due to that recent legislation. State receipts, that is a quarter over quarter for third quarter is 18%. But if we look at the last fiscal year, and that's just the revenue sharing, that's not the gross receipts, even a little higher, but some of that goes into the online payers tax relief fund, which is it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. But if we look at any comparison over the last few quarters of last year, it's going to be mid-single digits. It's really grown. And we did learn a month or two ago that we will be limited to 1% through June of 2022. When we look at the state per capita average last year versus this year, it has tightened, but we are still a little above the average. Some of that could be due to people come here to work from other communities. They have lunch, they buy things, but they don't live here, so they don't get counted in our population. We will see, but with all that growth, our sense is the range tightened up fairly quickly. But yeah, we're not real bullish on getting there even the next year, but at some point we hopefully do.
Madam Mayor, one place that would be helpful to our efforts to talk to the legislature about this issue would be to understand, to the extent that we can identify it, how much revenue we might be losing if we had other factors in this distribution formula. For instance, when the legislation was passed, there was conversation about having not just a nighttime population, but also having a daytime population as part of the calculation. Our daytime population is significantly larger than our nighttime population, even though our nighttime population is the biggest in the state. And I think to the extent that we could provide data that would show both how much we might otherwise get, but also data over the last 5 years since they passed this about how much the places that this was supposed to bring up to the norm really have come up to the norm. And that maybe it is time to look at that formula again now that everybody's on a more equal footing to begin with and figure out a more equitable distribution. So I just mention that because I know that the Association of Cities, for instance, is interested in revisiting that conversation. And to the extent that we can provide data for them to talk to legislators with, and for us to talk to legislators with, it'd be really helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember. The final section on this slide is just the airport traffic, and again, has rebounded more quickly than expected. The most recent quarter did exceed the quarter 2 years prior, pre-pandemic. And we have new nonstop flight options, Atlanta, Austin, Pullman, Moscow, and even seasonal service to New York City. So things are doing much better at the airport. Figured I'd throw in a few graphs after all the numbers. This is a graph just showing the unemployment rate, and you can see we've worked our way back down to where we were essentially strong economy before the pandemic. And there's the unemployment rates. They're low throughout Idaho. The United States has come down, but is quite a bit higher. When we compare ourselves to other Western metropolitan areas, we rank well. Salt Lake City was below 2%, that metropolitan statistical area, which is very, very low. But 2.2% is also quite low. Here's our employment, where you can see the blue dotted line by the red arrow up on the left. We had some growth before the pandemic hit. We've worked our way back. The bluish line on top of the green line is kind of where we are this year, and we're straddling that, but we're really not growing much above that. So that's kind of, again, showing the labor shortage. And the airport passenger traffic, the last quarter, it's a quarterly look, it has come up to where we were. So they appear to be back on track. And then just I put in real gross domestic product, which is adjusted for inflation. In the upper left graph, you can see last year we had negative growth, pandemic induced recession. This year, the timing of that was right around end of October, 5.4% real growth this year, 4.3% growth projected next year. So you can kind of see how things have come back. Federal stimulus has a lot to do with helping that economy get back, at least in those numbers. We still have a lot of parts of the economy which are struggling. And then the consumer price index is the most common inflation factor out there. It is a basket of goods, but you can see inflation being up after, frankly, going back years, the Federal Reserve, has been looking for higher inflation. And this forecast shows that in time that goes down. There's a lot of talk in the marketplace, concerns that inflation will reinforce itself and stay up, but there's a lot of deflationary forces in our economy as well, aging society and substitution and technology and low birth rates. So we'll see how that shakes out, but that's something we obviously look at as well. That's all I had. I'd be happy to stand for any questions, and then we do typically seek a motion to approve the end of your report.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
seeing no other questions, I would move that we approve the FY 2021 end of year report.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, any discussion? Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. So now we have a purchasing brief. So just, I'm going to let everybody know if you are not here for one of these next items, we've got probably another hour. You are welcome. I should have said that earlier. You are welcome to take your exit and enjoy the rest of your day. And with that, we will start the purchasing brief.
Hello, Mayor and members of council. My name is Missy Grothaus. I'm the purchasing agent for the city. I thank you for your time today and respectfully request an award decision regarding RFP 21-277 Airport Tenant Management Software. One proposer has significant local economic presence.
I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm sorry.
However, they were not ranked as the highest proposer. Is that better?
Sure.
I'm here to stand for any questions you may have regarding the process. And we also have Amy Snyder and Jason Richards from the airport to help address any project-specific questions.
It looks as though there are no questions.
So then we would respectfully request an award decision, please.
Yes.
Okay, so Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we approve RFP the 21-277 Boise Airport Tenant Management Software with the ProDigit proposal.
Thank you. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson, Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have two public hearings. The first is on the HCD Division of Planning and Development Services presentation of the CAPER report.
Mayor and council, thanks for having me back this afternoon to talk through the 2020 program year and the CAPER report. We are required, the Housing and Community Development Division is required to submit the CAPER to report on the activities we completed using home and Cdbg funds. The city is a participating jurisdiction, and as such, we receive entitlement funds from these two federal programs from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. As you can see, CDBG is primarily used for acquisition or rehabilitation projects of housing, public services. There is a 20% cap on what we're allowed to spend on public services, and then also neighborhood livability projects. And then we primarily use home funds to create new housing. This slide is a little bit overwhelming, a little bit complicated. You don't need to try to digest it all. But we did want to parse it out this way rather than in a lump sum because the eligibility criteria, varies between these different fund types. What I do want to draw your attention to is that the city received in PY20, program year 20, CDBG entitlement funds in the amount of 1.4 million, and then home entitlement program funds in the amount of $779,000 and some change. The city also earns program income from projects previously funded with CDBG or home through our loan products. And then additionally, I'll just call your attention to the CDBG CV or CDBG CARES funding. The city received its second allocation of these funds during program year 20. That amount was $584,480. So the city's total HUD financial resources available during this program year totaled more than 5.8 million. The funds available noted on that previous slide slot into three main project areas. We only report on projects that are completed in the program year for the CAPER. So while we're actively working on implementing other projects, what you'll see in the CAPER today and the highlights we brought forward are just what was completed during the last program year. To that end, we completed 3 neighborhood livability projects. 85 new trees were planted in the beds on the north side of Federal Way from Broadway to Protest. And then we added accessible playground equipment and installed that at Whitney Elementary. And then the Vista Median Art Project was also completed this year. And there's a few pictures depicting what that art installation looks like. Our public service efforts this year were actually able to reach a bit deeper, particularly because we had the CDBG CV or CARES funding, and that 20% cap I mentioned was waived by HUD this year. So through grant funds provided to Terry Riley Health Services, the Women's and Children's Alliance, and Catch, we were able to support the provision of medical services to almost 8,000 people experiencing homelessness and low-income individuals. We were able to provide crisis counseling and crisis case management services to almost or over 2,400 survivors of domestic violence. And I will just note here that domestic violence incidences really skyrocketed, during COVID. And then lastly, we were able to assist 738 clients through the coordinated entry process at our Path Home Connect. I will also note that 87% of the households that we served in program year 20 through one of our public service projects earned less than 50% of the area median income. So these are truly public services that are serving our lowest income households. Moving on to housing projects completed in PY20, CDBG funds specifically help support staff salaries at Catch that in turn provided case management to over 456 households. Among those households, 73 were able to exit homelessness through Catch's rapid rehousing program called Taking Root, and 96 households were able to exit homelessness through the Linda Fund, which the city of Boise also supports. We assisted 119 households with mortgage insurance, assistance, We also made sure to test any of those homes that were built pre-1978 and then ended up remediating 4 of them for lead-based paint. And then finally, we completed 10 rehabilitation projects. In years past, these projects we've been able to complete more. COVID really had an impact on what we were able to do this year, and we expect to complete more of these in program year 21. But 6 of those were in multifamily units within the city's own rental housing portfolio. This completed the rehabilitation of 80 units at Vista. And then we also completed 4 rehabilitations of single-family homes to preserve affordable housing. This slide shows those new construction projects that we have ongoing that we've been managing throughout program year 20. You'll see in each of the sub-bullets how many of the housing units are actually home or Cdbg assisted, and in turn, what that investment is leveraging in terms of partnership with other agencies as we continue our affordable housing efforts. And then lastly, this is the final program year of the 2016 to 2020 consolidated plan. Council approved the 2021 to 2026 consolidated plan in August. We are currently accepting comments based on the content of the draft caper. It is posted online now. We are not taking comments for the suggested use of future funds. That will be part of our annual action planning for the upcoming program year. And we are also accepting written comments through mail or email. And then we will submit the caper in time for our December 31st, 2021 deadline. And at this time, I'm ready for questions or any public comment at this time.
Any questions for Maureen? All right, I'll open up the public hearing. Is anybody here to testify on this item? Nobody's here for this one. Is anybody online?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you. Oh, with that, are there
Madam
questions?
Mayor, we are not adopting it because they're still open for public comment. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Council President, that is correct. Our requirement through HUD is simply to hold a public hearing for public comment. We already have the approval that we need to submit to HUD.
All right, but with nobody here or online to testify, I'll close this issue for today. Thank you. And next up, we have a pickup of the issue that you all heard, and we closed the hearing related to amending the development code regarding wireless communication. And I'll ask Celine just to give everybody a quick review of where you left things, and then I believe it's just up for deliberation. A motion, of course, and then deliberation.
Madam Mayor, council members.
Celine, we can't hear you.
It's on. Can you hear me now?
Lift it up a bit, maybe.
Madam Mayor, council members, on November 30th, we held a public hearing for a ordinance amendment to the wireless communication facilities section of Title 11. You directed us to have a few de minimis changes be reflected and to return to today's hearing to ensure that those changes are accurately reflected and for adoption if you so choose.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I reviewed the revised ordinance, and it certainly is in line with what we talked about. I think it looks great. I have one question for the council president and the pro tem. It's kind of down in the weeds, but there's a notice provision that was added requiring notification to the adjacent property owners, including across streets and alley. We discussed that at length. And I wondered if the two of you, well, let me back up. In a preceding section, section 2A1F, G or H, depending on how they're numbered. I think the numbering is off incidentally, so that's just something to tidy up. It spells out that disturbed property shall be repaired and that removal of private trees shall not happen without city consent. And I just wonder if you want the notification provision, which currently basically says, if you're going to be installing something, you've got to tell the neighbors. I wonder if you want it to reference specifically their right to have their property repaired, because I recall that being something that the two of you focused on in the hearing.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. You know, as I was looking at the notice procedure that was added, I was wondering, actually the same thing. Would that notice apply to section F and H, G and H, F and G? We do need to renumber those.
Madam Mayor.
And that's your question, correct?
That was my question. So maybe the way to move it along is that I would move to approve the amendment, the ordinance as amended by staff, subject to inserting in section 2A5H an explicit reference to the landowner's rights under section 2A1. I think it should be G. It's currently numbered H, but you know the section.
Yeah, they
I'm
can
talking
fix
about.
that.
Yes. Second.
We have a motion, a second, and before there's discussion, I noted that there's a resident that texted on Zoom that he's here to testify on this item. Mr. DeHaas, you'll recall in the hearing on the 30th, we heard your testimony and the testimony from everybody that was available then. We closed the public hearing and held this over for deliberation because of the late hour at which we found ourselves. And so where we are at now is we have a motion on the table for council to deliberate on.
Thank you. Madam Mayor?
Yes.
My only other comment, besides the question I also had, was on the noise ordinance. And we do have not a decibel limit, but a definition of adverse noise in our code, and I'm comfortable with that. I think that we should make sure that we review. I think in the case of some of these, the noise is not a decibel as I'm understanding it, but it's the consistent kind of low hum that could be pretty disturbing over time. And so I think we just need to ensure that we're watching that, and that if that does become an issue, we are thinking of a way to address it. I'm comfortable with going forward as we are today.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to amplify what the council president said. I think that's something that some of us have heard from the public is in addition to perhaps not liking the visual aesthetics involved in this, but it's the noise. I think that some people have conveyed. So just want to amplify that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support all these changes and just want to thank you, Celine, for getting monopine squeezed into the color and placement. I hope to see those pop up all over the city when it comes to the larger towers.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I support all of the changes that have been brought forward. I just wanted to follow up. Celine did include this in the memo about, and I heard from a couple of residents since the publishing of this about replacing wooden poles in residential neighborhoods with black poles, which have been how these have been rolling out in the city so far. And I do still think that that's a concern. And so if the right course of action is to direct planning and zoning to develop standards for different areas, I would like to further explore that because I do think that that's important. And I did hear from a couple of constituents specifically regarding that provision.
All right, it looks like.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that an answer to Councilmember
I'm
Williams?
sorry. I thought we were voting now. We're not, I thought I misunderstood.
Nope. But it looks like we're about to do that.
Yeah.
All good? Okay. Clerk, will you call the roll? Yes.
Yes.
Patrick made it, seconded by Elaine.
Yes. Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And with that, I believe that there's nothing else on this long agenda.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
with my final motion as a Boise City Council member, so that we can all go out and celebrate TJ Thompson Day, I would move that we adjourn for the year of 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you all very much.